Okay, this is an off program just to fill the gap, and I will talk about, my humble experience and just to overview, and that could be, useful for a young neurosurgeon about some concept in terms of transcranial approaches to the sellar and parasellar area. And this topic could be useful also if you consider that, traumatic brain injury sometimes involve the anterior middle skull base. You know very well that anterior middle skull base, it's, from the anatomical point of view, is a challenging region. And you have to take in mind that, lots of lesion can involve especially the sellar and parasellar area. And when we talk about skull-based approaches, the magic and the basic principle is always the same. So remove the bone to leave the brain alone, as Professor Amefti say, one of my mentors. And this critical concept to classify it in your mind, what is which are the corridors in the anterior, middle, and posterior skull base in terms of median, paramedian, and lateral corridors also. And when we talk about, skull base, especially sellar and parasellar area, you have to consider that most of the lesion can involve also a neighboring region like, pterygoid fossa, parapharyngeal space, mandibular, infratemporal fossa, and so on. And this is an overview of the, neighboring region that we can deal with this kind of surgery when we talk about transcranial approaches with sellar and parasellar region. Nobody can argue against the usefulness of endoscopic surgery today, and everybody knows very well these main corridors to the anterior and middle skull base, especially at the level of the sellar and parasellar area, and these are the main steps. But nobody can argue about the fact that the advent of the nasoseptal flap totally revolutionized this kind of surgery. But still today there are some indication for transcranial approaches that I'm gonna talking about. And in transsphenoidal, as you see here, it is beautiful because you have lots of corridors, suprasellar corridor, suprachiasmatic, infrachiasmatic, and whatever you want. But I don't want to take too much time to talk about all the flexibility of this kind of endoscopic approach to the median parasellar region. But I just want to focus once again about the concept that in this, type of skull-based lesion, you have three different corridors, and for sure there is no, and the main principle is the fact that you can reach with endoscopic approach the median paramedian corridor that lies on the same way, but it's really difficult to reach the lateral skull-based surgery when we talk about, sellar and parasellar region. Conversely, with transcranial approach, you can reach lateral, paramedian, and even median corridor. This is one of the most important advantage in the transcranial related to the transcranial approaches to the skull base. You have to have clear in mind that some classification, and this is an overview of the classification that I summarized in a book that we recently published with our group. And also there are some pictures because especially for young neurosurgeons that start to do this kind of surgery, you have to perfectly know this kind of anatomy, special ICA, because very few people knows the details of ICA and collaterals. And this is an overview of the paramedian skull base and all the corridors that are some doors that you can use to enter this kind of skull base, a middle skull base. Some of them, especially Dolen-Akuba corridor, are very, very important and useful to reach this kind of lesion. And don't forget that when we deal with this kind of lesion, this lesion usually can involve different neighboring space, not only sellar and parasellar region, but during their growing, they can involve also anterior cranial fossa, middle cranial fossa, and even, retrosellar space, petroclival junction, and all this region. But this is the key, slides of my presentation about the indication of transcranial approaches for giant, for example, pituitary adenoma in endoscopic area. This is maybe could sound some anachronistic view, but this is everything but anachronistic because we recently, in a paper that we published with one of my mentors, Professor Amefti, we summarized, those factors that are related to the individual anatomical variability of the sellar and parasellar area that we have to take into account even in the endoscopic era. And these kind of factors are namely pneumatization of the sphenoid sinus that sometimes can be a contraindication to endoscopic skull-based surgery, angiomorphology of the internal carotid arteries, dimensions of the sella, vascular pattern of the intercavernous sinuses, and especially anatomy of the sellar diaphragm, because sometimes you can have some diaphragmatic constriction that can limit your corridor during, endoscopic transnasal approach. And everybody knows the fact that with transcranial approach, pterional, and the addictive variation of the pterional approach like COZ and similar, you can have three different corridors. The first one is the transsylvian, and then the second one is the subfrontal, and then the third most useful one is the pretemporal corridor, that is beautiful corridor to the parasellar area and space. And you have to keep in mind that all of these corridors correspond to precise and well-defined intradural corridors that are some, routes to reach our targets. And especially because we can reach even the retrocellular space through these deep windows, and some of them are related to transsylvian perspectives, and other of them are related to pretemporal perspectives. This is the main contribution that Professor Dolenk maybe gave to all of us, to skull-based surgery, and this is the Dolenk-Akuba approach to the parasellar area. That is a workhorse that I want to summarize in 7 steps for young neurosurgeon. The first step, before to start this step, one of the most important aspects is to perform the CSF release. And don't forget that you don't need any lumbar drainage here to withdraw any CSF, because you have the trigeminal system here that you can open to withdraw the CSF and to, work in a so-called leakic brain. And then don't forget, never, that is a beautiful anatomy that you have to keep in mind, like anterior, medial, and lateral loop of the ICA. That's the reason why I told you, especially my take-home message to young neurosurgeons, you have to keep in mind and to know perfectly the anatomy of the ICA, especially the cavernous carotid and the paraclinoidal carotid here. And when you think about this kind of lesion, you have to take in mind that you have different pattern of growth. Some lesion can be, in the medial, posterior to the medial loop. Some lesion can grow anterior to the medial loop. And some lesion can grow, medial to the medial loop. And these are, the so-called, also you work in so-called carotid collar here, and carotid collar is the, marks the limits of the ICA in terms of proximal and distal dural ring, and you have an interdural space here that you have to keep in mind when you think about the growing pattern of the lesion that involve this kind of space, especially meningioma, but also Meckel's scale trigeminal schwannoma. In terms of Dolenk approach, that is the workhorse of the Parasellar's transcranial approach to the parasellar area, you have a step 1. The step 1 is directed to the contralateral sellar area here, and you work exactly at the level of the interdural space in between the distal and proximal dural ring. The 7 steps of this approach is, directed to the ipsilateral sellar area and carotid sinus and cavernous sinus here, and you are working still at the level of the interdural space. After that, you have to keep in mind that you can turn the table to perform these 2 very, very different kind of step, and you work in 180 degrees toward this kind of target. And in doing this, the extension of the head is one of the most important key points to reach this lesion, especially when they have a very huge supradiaphragmatic extension, like we saw in this picture. And then we have a step 3. The step 3 is carried out through the so-called supratrochlear triangle. Here, you work in a very narrow space to remove that part of lesion that is just posterior to the medial loop of the cavernous ICA. And this step consists in a widening of the anteromedial triangle of Dolenk-Akuba here. And then you have to step 4 that is directed to this part of lesion, especially giant pituitary adenoma or recurrent pituitary adenoma here, where the pattern of growth is just anterior to the medial, cavernous sinus medial loop of the ICA. And this step is directed through the so-called infratrochlear triangle that is, that is also known as a Parkinson triangle. This triangle is very, very important because it was the first triangle through which Professor Dwight Parkinson performed the first ligation of the, carotid cavernous fistula here at the level of the inferolateral trunk rising from the lateral part of the cavernous carotid here. The step number 5 is again, you know, directed toward the sixth cranial lobe at the level of the infratrochlear triangle here and toward the medial lobe of the ICA. And then you have the step 7 that is an intradural step. You have to open the dural step. You have 5 steps that are totally extradural. You work under the brain. You don't touch the brain. But at the level of the step 6, you have to open the dura here, and you can convert the interdural space with the common space that is a combined intra and interdural exposure. You make, you know, wall space through which you can remove all this kind of tumor, and you can remove everything, you know, by transcranial approach with step 6. And then this is just an overview of what you can see at the end of this surgery. You have different kind of intradural corridors. You have an interchiasmatic corridor here. You can work just lateral to the ICA, and you can work at the level of the, you know, opticocarotid recess here, going down to the sellar and intrasellar space. And this is, you know, other corridors through which you can remove, you know, this is step 7. Through step 7, that is the last one, you can remove, the, you know, the posterior clinoid here to enlarge and increase the space and the working space and the so-called angle of attack at the level of the retrosellar area. And you can finish to remove the tumor at the level of the interchiasmatic, you know, space, as you see in this picture. And this is just an overview of what, you know, is the versatility of this pretemporal transcavernous approach. This is a picture of one of the best articles that I read in my life, maybe. And this is, you know, an article from one of my best friends from Taipei, that is Professor Senfok Su, that schematized and, you know, summarized the main corridors to the transcavernous approach to the parasellar and retrosellar area. And I hope that this just overview and this refresh could be useful for young neurosurgeons that start to deal with this kind of complex surgery, this complex pathology. And sorry for, you know, if I took too much time. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Professor Luzzi, for this very beautiful presentation and these spectacular images, anatomical images. Thank you very much.
I'm totally available if someone has some questions or...
Yes, are there some questions in the audience?
Sorry, Emad, can you send a link to Anil? Anil is saying his link is not working. Maybe please, can you send it to him now? Sabino, again, awesome talk. Really enjoy the way you take us through all those different steps. Amazing. I think it's good for young people to see all this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so Bunsen and Mona, you want to wrap up this session so that we can move on to the next session, please?
Yes. Yeah, thanks to all the great lectures, and I think we can close the session for now for this session, and we move to the next session. Mona.
Yes, thank you all the speakers for these excellent conferences. Thank you very much.
And Emad, sorry, can you please help Professor Michael Feeling to read his video? He's having difficulties switching on his video.
Can I fill this gap for a few seconds just for a comment that we have almost more than 200 people online. This is beautiful because it means that, you know, all of these guys are very interested in this event, and I'm not seeing it on YouTube, but they are telling me that on YouTube we are even more people. So this is a great success, and it means that lots of people are with us, and this is the main commitment of World Federation Neurosurgical Society that is bridging the gaps between countries. And so congratulations, guys, once again, and thank you for Muna that is moderating, you know, this directing despite all these unexpected, delays and everything. Congratulations from the bottom of my heart.
It was a honor. It was a big honor for me, and I enjoyed very much listening for all honor.
Okay, I think